Welcome to Three Count Commentaries. This your boy MongoSlade. So, I was hanging out on Millennial Smart's community post recently, and I saw somebody asked him a question. I don't think he answered it, but I figure it was a pretty good damn question, and I figure I'd take a tackle at it. I'm not gonna put a lot of thought into it, but it's something that made me think, and it was like a earworm. Like once you read it, you have to start thinking about it. And so here's the question. It says, Millennial Smart, do you think Eric Bischoff played a role in killing wrestling with his bloodlust for trying to put WWE down and forcing all the ideas to be burned up over the course of a few years? It's so much that happened during those wars that ultimately killed wrestling. Yeah, Bischoff had awesome ideas, but it's ultimately hurt the industry later and down the road, which is now. So that made me think that, what did Bischoff actually do that, did a lot of damage to the industry? And so it's kind of, it was like I said, it was an earworm. It was a thing that I just kept thinking about. So I came up with 5 things. So let's go through these 5 things that I think of. And if you have more, let me know in the comment section below. But one of the things that he did that changed wrestling quite a bit was that he focused on live shows. He wanted to move away from taped episodes. Of course, he did this by giving away spoilers. By giving away spoilers, he was able to damage Raw in the long term by being able to say, hey, this is what you can expect on this show. Don't bother watching it. In doing that, he put a premium on live television. And putting a premium on live television, what it did is it hurt long-form storytelling. So now people can't really plan long-form storytelling. You're booking week to week. Instead of, back in the day, what would happen is you would tape some shows. You would tape superstars maybe over a course of a weekend or a couple of weeks. Because superstars is only an hour. So maybe you had 4-hour tapings. That's 4 hours of content. You probably have some matches that are dark. They never make TV. A bunch of other stuff. And then you would do some backstage promos. You may do some in-arena promos, angles, stuff like that. And then you just put it like a pastiche. Put the show together. And then ship the show off to whatever network. And sure, people might be able to spoil the matches, but they couldn't spoil the segments and everything that went along with it. But now when Nitro came along and they're giving away spoilers and they want everybody they're actively trying to harm their competition. Now everybody has to run live, which means everything needs to be done live, which means now people who never could talk now have to talk live. That's a completely different ball game. It changed the business almost completely. Now, this ended up being good in the long term. It didn't hurt the business, but this is something that did. Let me be clear because I know I'm confusing people. It made the business more money. Because what he found was that live sports entertainment, or live sports in general, are worth more than taped sports. That's what he found out. So from a revenue standpoint, it worked out better for everybody that the shows are live. But in the long form, for storytelling purposes, taped was better because you could edit out the things that you didn't want. Now you have, like in the past, you would have an angle that would be teased, but it will be dropped, and you could edit it out of future information. Now you can tease a promo or tease a segment, and tease and tease and tease and tease and tease, and it ends up going nowhere. Case in point, the Bianca Belair Sasha Banks thing. Because the show was live, but of course WWE also pulled some bullshit because they knew well in advance that she wasn't going to be there. But if the show was taped, right, they could have edited her out and said she's not going to be there. It's going to be a replacement, yada, yada, yada. There's whole podcasts that deal with the canceled matches, and there's stuff that people put out well in advance. Like you've probably seen it. The posters of like Bret Hart and Hulk Hogan. The posters of different guys who were supposed to wrestle as the champion. These types of things that go out there because WWE used to tape in advance. Now that they don't, you lose all of that. You know, all of the cool ideas that might have been out there before, the things that they might have wanted to do, they're so worried about people spoiling everything now that they don't do any cool shit anymore. They try to do everything live. And what it ends up doing is certain segments end up running too long. And back in the day, you used to be able to edit that stuff, but now you can't. So now if The Miz goes overtime, he's just went overtime. Instead of, okay, we can shave a second here and there out of this match, we have to run the match, you know, as fast as possible. It did end up damaging, especially some taped wrestling shows. Ended up damaging those. See, the second thing he did that I think it was the most damaging is the hot shotting. Hot shotting angles, hot shotting matches, hot shotting feuds. Bischoff, and I like Eric Bischoff. I'm a supporter of Eric Bischoff. He really only had 3 good ideas: the NWO, Sting, Crow Sting, and Goldberg. That was really it. That was really like the 3 ideas that he had. All the other ideas, bringing in the cruiserweights, wasn't his completely idea. He stole that from Paul Heyman. You know, the NWO, of course, was an idea he took from New Japan. Diamond Dallas Page was something that was pushed upon him, and DDP didn't end up being the success that Goldberg was. Goldberg just kind of fell in his lap. But the hot shotting, though, we're going to do big title switches on TV because it miseducated the audience. People were not used to big title switches on TV. And then title switches on TV became like a normal thing, especially during the Attitude Era. Like the biggest hot shot that they ever did, anybody ever did, was Lex Luger beating Hulk Hogan on TV. Now you may think, oh, but what about Hogan and Goldberg? It's like, well, no. This was the biggest hot shot because Hogan didn't need to lose. At least in the Goldberg-Hogan situation. If you put Goldberg in the ring with Hogan, Goldberg needs to win, period. Lex Luger didn't need to win that match. It was done to pop the rating. And then it hurt Sting in the long term. It goes back to what I said about part 1. Because instead of Hogan going into Starrcade unbeaten, undefeated, they had to pop a rating. So they put Lex Luger over. So it wouldn't just pop that rating, but it would also pop the next week's rating. Right? Because now you've done the title switch, and people want to stay tuned to see the title switch, or at least see the title match. They don't know if it's a switch yet. You switch the title, so now you hook them for next week. Next week they're like, oh man, Lex Luger won the title. Now what's going to happen? Because they prioritize TV so much at the cost of pay-per-view. And then of course the Goldberg thing was a big money match that they threw away on Nitro. Probably, you know, the amount of hot shotting, and it forced Vince to hot shot too. And I'm not even going to hold you up. It did. You know, it did. It forced Vince to hot shot too. And that's Vince Russo's jam. The hot shotting. Oh, we just going to throw a title on a guy in the middle of the show. You know, there it is. No thought, no plan, nothing. We'll figure it out as we go along. That kind of stuff started with Bischoff hot shotting. But now you also had the, the hot shotting of matches. You know, we got to throw away Hogan and Sting. Their very first match was on Nitro, if I remember correctly. They didn't even save it for like a pay-per-view. They wanted to have a big start to Nitro, so they had this big babyface versus babyface Sting versus Hogan match that was on Nitro. And it forced WWE to do it as well. You know, they held off as long as they could and tried to tell somewhat long-term stories, but they were getting eaten alive by all the hot shotting. You know, especially when they actually hit something that worked in terms of the NWO storyline. That's something that was episodic that they could build on week to week. Once he had something that was episodic that he could build off of, no wonder it ran away. You know, they had a runaway success for those 83 weeks or whatever it was. But he was already doing a lot of hot shotting and different things before that. This leads us to my bullet point number 3, which is a focus on TV ratings and the ratings war. Because Bischoff was so focused on the ratings war, it gets everybody else talking about ratings. When I was a kid, nobody ever talked about TV ratings for wrestling. Nobody cared. And then out of nowhere, as I became a teenager, that's all people talked about. Who won the ratings war? Who had more viewers? Raw or Nitro? And I just kept thinking, like, I don't give a shit. Even then, I didn't care. I watched whatever show I thought was better at the time. You know, I was always a WWF loyalist, so I always watched Raw, even if I knew what was going to happen. Even if Bischoff spoiled it, I watched Raw anyway, because I always liked more guys that were on Raw than were in WCW. But it became a thing that was just, it was, especially when kids had computers, and some kids did have computers in those days, it was absolutely unbearable. It was impossible to deal with. And now that whole obsession with TV ratings, it dominates wrestling discourse right now. It is awful. The amount of people who all of a sudden are advertiser executives who know everything about every point on a rating scale. It's like, God, get the fuck out of here. You know, did it tick up a half point in this demographic? It's like, bro, I don't know. I don't care. Like, I don't want to get into the weeds of that shit. To me, all I look at is the general idea. Is it going up or is it going down? Is it going up? Is it going down? Is it staying the same? Going up, going down, staying the same. What is it? If it consistently going down, okay. Consistently going up, Consistently the same, I look at the big picture. I'm not getting into nook and crannies. But there's people out there who will try to quarter hour you to death to try to prove their favorite wrestler is a draw. And like, that shit don't mean anything. Okay? It doesn't mean anything. Not really. Because sometimes people draw in a specific spot because of other things that are going on. Sometimes people don't change the channel. And people are just kind of like, whatever, man. I'll watch this, whatever it is. What is this? Trent versus Orange Cassidy? Who cares? And they'll just leave it there and they'll go to the bathroom or something like that. Just because you got recorded doesn't mean you actually sat there and watched it. It's the same thing kind of with YouTube videos and stuff like that. These things are not accurate, you know? They're not that accurate. It's just the best information that we have. And people are absolutely obsessed with it. And this is a Bischoff thing. I don't remember anybody talking about this shit. Because nobody cared. You know? Outside of the TV executives, nobody gave a shit. And now all the wrestling fans care about is TV ratings. What was the ratings? What was the ratings? They'll argue about the ratings. Soon as the ratings drop, it's people arguing about the ratings. Was so-and-so a draw? Was so-and-so's, did their match make money? Where were they positioned on the card? And were they there at 9 o'clock or 8:45? You know, that kind of shit, man. It's like, it's dumb, man. But that's a Bischoff thing. You know, when he started doing the whole, I'm the king of wrestling because we're winning in the ratings and all that kind of stuff, that did a lot of damage to the wrestling business. Now you got the demo guide on TV because now we're talking about the demos, the almighty by God demos. It's stupid. So my fourth bullet point could have easily been the first one, was the reliance on, quote, big surprises and debuts. Essentially, people jumping ship. Because he started this shit the moment Nitro began, when he had Lex Luger jump ship. And every week, it was all about who's going to jump ship. You know, Scott Hall shows up, Kevin Nash goes up, Ted DiBiase shows up. Who else is going to be there? Who else is coming? And these people were not really fully integrated into storylines and integrated into the shows. For the most part, it was just who's going to show up. Not what are they going to do or what's the purpose of this character being here. It just became, he's here. And he was kind of like, okay, Ted DiBiase is there. Ted DiBiase is retired. So what? He's in WCW. You know, like, it became that kind of thing. You know, and then we had that's why you had the NWO have 400 people in it. Because it was like, he hired all these people to pop the rating, to have the big surprise, to bring in the names, and there was no plan. So just throw them in the NWO. Just throw them in the Cruiserweight division. You know, and it kept happening. It went for 4 fucking years of them doing that. You bring in Mike Awesome just to get the pop, and you got no plan for him. Just the fat chick thriller. Like, what? What is the purpose of that? Why'd you hire the guy? What you bring him in for? Well, we got to pop the crowd. We got to do something. And now AEW is doing the same thing. They're signing guys just to say that they have them on the roster. Just for the pop. And then they have no idea, no earthly idea what to do with them after that. It's like, we got the pop. Now the fans are like, who's next? What's next? And I remember being a kid, and again, I don't hate to be like, a super brainy kid, but I didn't give a shit about most of the people who jumped ship to WCW outside of Hall and Nash. I didn't care. I didn't care that X-Pac was there. I didn't care about the 1-2-3 kid. I didn't give a shit about him. I didn't care about Ted DiBiase. I knew he was retired. Hacksaw Jim Duggan, like, fuck, I don't care. Like, most of those guys who jumped ship, I did not care. And eventually it gets to that point. And then it started getting worse. He just started trying to build up guys who nobody really... Virgil. All those guys started jumping ship. Like, who's going to jump ship? And that became a really, really, really big problem. It became a huge problem. WWE did it a couple of times back then. The Jericho thing, when they did the big... It wasn't even a surprise, but it was kind of a surprise. He kind of told everybody it was coming, but... it was vignettes played, so it wasn't like he popped up out of nowhere. There was also no plan for him either. They just brought him in just because. But, it was that mentality that we're going to shock and surprise people, and building the show off shock and surprise and not off of natural twists and turns in the story. Like, a good story can have twists and turns in it. Add new characters, take characters out, and it won't feel like you're hot-shotting. It won't feel like a big surprise that's absolutely, makes no sense. But when you just add characters to pop the crowd, even if the character, if it's a character that people like, so what? Because they can say, okay, now that you have this character, now what are you going to do? There's nothing. That's like when WWE brought in Scott Steiner, right? They had the big pop for Scott Steiner coming in. And then they had the moment he started the feud with Triple H, you knew things were off the rails. There was no plan. They had the big pop of the NWO coming in. But as soon as you started seeing Scott Hall and Stone Cold Steve Austin, you're like, wait a minute. You didn't put a lot of thought into this, did you? And it's the same thing. It's the same thing going on today. It's all about big surprises, big pops, and leaving people with a wet noodle in their hand saying, okay, you got your surprise, you got your pop, I don't have anything else. WCW was the king of that shit. ECW too. ECW did a lot of it too. But Bischoff was the shits with that stuff, man. Because that's what Nitro was built on. And that's what you see a lot of people talk about. It's like, oh, this is what wrestling used to be when I was a kid, and it was fun because we never knew who was going to jump ship. It's like, no, I didn't know. And I was glad I didn't know. But 9 times out of 10, the people who jumped didn't care. Shawn didn't jump. Undertaker didn't jump. Brett got pushed out. And those were my guys. Like, Razor Ramon was my guy, which is what got me watching WCW pretty regularly anyway. But other than that, I didn't care about most of the guys that, Savage. I loved Savage. I was a big fan of him. But a lot of those guys that WCW had, I didn't care about anyway. And I can't imagine there's a lot of people who are sitting at home right now, some kid who, while there's some 40-year-old guy oozing his pants about CM Punk, some kid is like, who is this guy? Why he's so sleepy looking? What is up with this dude? He may see Daniel Bryan. Oh, that's interesting. But, if you're, 14, you were 7 when CM Punk was a big star. Is he still a big star to you now? Are you even still watching wrestling now? Like if you were 19, you're maybe 26 now. If you were 30 then you're 38 now or something like that. Then maybe that's a big deal. And that seems to be the target demographic of people that I see that are super, super excited is people who are over the age of 35. But for me and for a lot of people, when you have middling stars that are jumping ship, they seem not to care. It doesn't really transfer that well. It's just hot shotting. It's just another version of hot shotting. That's all it is. So you also had I didn't put this in my bullet points, but you had the sacrifice of pay-per-views. AEW is doing that right now, where they focus so much on TV that they forget about the pay-per-view. Now they're trying to be smart by putting certain people on pay-per-view, like Andrade or CM Punk or somebody like that, who doesn't really work on TV. But they have been trying to do all this build-up for all of these big angles. They've been why not have CM Punk debut at All Out? Well, they didn't do that because they got TV partners, and they're like, well, we're going to have them on TV. We're going to have Kenny Omega win the title on TV to pop the rating. Same concept, hot shotting. So the fifth thing is built off the fourth thing, which is a focus on names. Bischoff was enamored with names. He did not one of the things that really hurt WCW was that when Bischoff really got rolling, he did not push any new stars. He was focused on names. Piper, Hogan, Savage, Hennig. He loaded up WCW's mid-card with former WWF mid-carders. Then you'll had the occasionally Raven, Chris Benoit, Dean Malenko, Rey Mysterio, but those guys had a glass ceiling. Those guys might win the U.S. title, maybe not, more likely not. But he kept Flair in the mix. Guys who were hot in the early 90s, the late 80s, who still had some juice. That was Bischoff's jam. He was keeping those guys in rotation. Even well after the time they shouldn't have been there. There's no reason Piper should have been main event in pay-per-views in 1996. Just not possible. It's stupid to do so. He was not in the physical shape to do it. And as the performer, he wasn't in the right mind to do it. And what made it even worse is TNA did the same thing. They brought him in. I don't think he worked much in TNA as far as getting in the ring. But they brought in Roddy Piper to feud with Vince Russo in TNA. That shit was awful. And all of these things that I mentioned in here, you can apply a lot of this same stuff to TNA. Because they did almost all of this same shit too. The who's going to jump, the big debut, big surprise with no plan. The only time they really did have a plan was, I think they might have had a plan for Christian and maybe Kurt Angle. That was about it. Everybody else was, I can't believe he's in the Impact Zone. And that was it. That's not wrestling, man. You're not supposed to throw pomp and circumstance and blow your load as soon as the guy comes in the door. Because then you have to do something else with the guy. What's tomorrow? Once you blow your load on him coming in, what is there for you to do tomorrow? I would rather a guy come in, understate it, and build momentum over time, because at least people who are watching your show can watch him build momentum and attach their train to that momentum like the ringmaster. No, he didn't come in as stunning Steve Austin and beating everybody. He came in as the middling-ass ringmaster, and people got to watch him become Stone Cold Steve Austin. And then they got to watch Stone Cold Steve Austin grow. They were able to hook that wagon, hook their wagon to that train. And that's why you have to build new stars and not focus on names. You can inject Hulk Hogan into your show. Okay, cool. You got Hulk Hogan, now what? Well, we're going to have him wrestle the Booty Man. Who the fuck is the Zodiac? Who the fuck is that guy? And why do I care? He's going to wrestle the Shark. What? I don't give a shit. Who the fuck is the Shark? It's that kind of stuff that really, really, really damaged wrestling. Those things really, man. And now I see Tony Khan doing the same thing. They blame Vince for it all day. They bringing back Goldberg. Again, Goldberg has 2 matches a year. Brock probably has 2 matches a year. Sting had more matches already this year in 2021 than he ever should have had. Period. And he worked TV already. There's no excuse for it. Jericho was wrestling every week. There's no excuse for it. They're focusing on names because they're trying to pop the crowd. instead of telling stories and leading the crowd to the conclusion, leading them down the twists and the turns. That's when you are the storyteller. When you are the storyteller, you are telling the story, you are hooking the audience. You got to do something to hook them, but you don't give them the resolution immediately. That's what the long form storytelling is. You know, you push back the resolution as far as you can. That's when you do your twists and your turns, because that gets you out of your resolution. If a guy's chasing the title and he never wins, that's a problem. You know, if a guy is constantly fighting a heel, a dastardly hated heel, and he never beats him, like when Matt Hardy didn't beat Edge, like that was weird. You know, you had Edge win the feud, and Matt Hardy got booted over to SmackDown. And he was kind of like, but you know. But WWE, the way they book is they focus on names, but they have their guys. You know, they use who's available. Like Hulk Hogan is available, okay, we'll team him up with Edge. Does that make sense? No, doesn't matter. We're trying to get Edge over, and that's the kind of things they do. And AEW doing that too, but the little buddy system, you can't do it with multiple people at the same time because everybody then knows what you're trying to do. Oh, we're gonna have Chris Jericho partnered up with MJF. Christian partnered up with Jungle Boy. Sting partnered up with Darby Allin. And people are pattern recognizing machines, which I am. I see what you're doing. And then I'm smart to the wrestling business, so I know what you're doing. I know you're trying to use Sting to make me like Darby Allin. That ain't gonna work. I'm too old for that. And a kid, what do they know about Sting? Sting was an old man when they were born. You know, Sting's last match on TNT before this year was 2001. Technically, if you were a kid, you weren't even born yet. So you don't really remember Sting, right? So why would you start liking Darby Allin because he hangs out with Sting? You wouldn't. Because you probably like, why is Darby Allin hanging out with this old ass man? A kid will think the opposite way. They may think Darby Allin is cool and Sting is just holding on to him. Kind of like a kid who was, if you was born in 1998, you know, you've only known Ric Flair as an old man. And you see him hanging out with Randy Orton all the time. It's kind of like when I was a kid, I had no idea Bobby the Brain Heenan was a real wrestler. I had no idea. Bobby the Brain Heenan was just a guy who hung out with Andre the Giant. And that was it. It took for me to become an adult for me to recognize, oh, Bobby Heenan actually did some stuff. You know, he managed other people. He was actually a wrestler. You have to take that into account when you're building your audience. And then just putting two people together, it doesn't work. Again, that's another focusing on names. What is Darby Allin's identity? I have no idea. He's been on TV for 3 years. I have no idea what he's supposed to be or what he, you know, or anything. Just putting him with Sting doesn't do anything because there's no definition to their relationship. Why does Sting hang out with him? I don't know. Do you know? All it seems like to me and what Darby Allin is, I like this kid. Sting, why do you hang out with Darby Allin? I like him. CM Punk, why do you want to fight Darby Allin? I like him. Like, okay, whatever. But these are Bischoff ideas, man. Bischoff did this in TNA when he made Ric Flair the mentor of AJ Styles, and you had Scott Steiner's little buddy and Petey Williams, and you had who else had a little buddy? I think it was, oh God, I forget who it was, but it was around the same time where just about everybody who was somebody in WCW or in WWE came to TNA, and they were a part of the little buddy system. And now AEW has the same thing where they have a little buddy system. You know, even as far as we're dressing alike and we're in tag team matches together, and people are just supposed to, I will never, ever. And one of the most signature TNA things to me is seeing AJ Styles in a Ric Flair robe. I will never not see that and laugh. That was totally not his character, totally not his personality. But when you don't know what to do with these guys, because we got to make young guys, That's the same obsession as we got to push the older guys. We got to make new stars. We got to make new stars. We got to make new stars. It becomes, we try to microwave new stars. Instead of just letting the guy find himself and develop himself, he has to be buddied up with somebody else. And if you pay attention to Ric Flair at this time, oh, well, now you get a heaping helping of AJ Styles. But what if I don't want AJ Styles? What if this doesn't fit AJ Styles and he looks like a goof trying to be like mini Ric Flair? You know, then, you know, hey, we don't know what to do after that. We tried to make new stars. Like, no, you didn't, because you didn't let the guy be himself. You put the guy behind someone else. It's the same thing. Go back to the Ringmaster, right? What was the Ringmaster? He was the henchman of Ted DiBiase. So you put Stone Cold Steve Austin behind Ted DiBiase. Now, it ended up working for his longer form story, which I'll get into one day. But having a guy managed by somebody and the guy doesn't fit the style of that person, you know, look at what's going on with Paul Heyman and Roman Reigns versus what happens in the situation that I'm talking about as far as the little buddy system, where, you know, the older talent is talking on his behalf. You know, he's trying to become more like the older talent. He's even, you know, taking some of his moves, or he's wearing his gear, or, you know, something like that, where it's like a mini-me. And that doesn't work. That does not work. That's still pushing names. You're still pushing Ric Flair just under the guise of, well, we hope that it helps AJ Styles. We're still pushing Sting under the hopes of, well, maybe it'll rub off on Darby Allin. No. That's not going to work. But focusing on names, bringing in people from the past, you know, Roddy Piper, Randy Savage, Hulk Hogan, Jim Duggan, Ted DiBiase, people who really didn't have that much to offer physically anymore. You know, he even brought in Jimmy Hart, right? Like, he just... If I see Jimmy Hart, and I think Jimmy Hart has already popped up in AEW, but that's the kind of stuff that I'm looking for, and that's the kind of stuff that when I think about Bischoff's influence in wrestling, that's what I think of. I think of those 6 things. I think of, you know, the premium on live shows, forcing wrestling to be live. The hot shotting, you know, the almighty pop for the crowd and trying to build an audience based on shock and awe. You know, the focus on the TV ratings at the cost of pay-per-views. For God's sake, they gave away Goldberg and Hogan on TV and then tried to sell you Hennig and Goldberg as a pay-per-view match. It was ridiculous. You know, and the focus on names, focusing on people who already made their name. Those are the things that I think of when I think about Eric Bischoff and his influence in wrestling. And there's probably some other things too. But those were the 5 things that came to me that I just wrote down. But let me know what you guys think about Eric Bischoff's influence on the wrestling business. Like this video, share this video, subscribe to the channel, donate to the channel, and I'll talk to you guys later.
Old non-aggression. Once that lesson sets in, you'll see a session. But you got an affection for no progression, regression. The best don't